I am William Castaneda. In general, I am an ordinary, inconspicuous man. It turned out that my work does not take much time, and I can safely work from home and at the same time earn good money. But this lifestyle has the opposite effect. Because of the constant presence at home with children, you may not notice when your wife went to other men.
Several weeks ago, on a beautiful morning, I found myself caught up in the hustle of morning preparations, trying to get our 2 children off to school, when suddenly a phone call broke the silence. It was just before 8 in the morning, and I was surprised to wonder who could be calling so early, especially from an unknown number. "Good morning. Who's calling?" I asked, picking up the receiver. "William, it's me," came the familiar voice of my wife Amy on the other end of the line. We had just talked the night before, and I was curious what urgent matter could have arisen. Amy works at a marketing agency and print shop in our town, often going on short business trips. Meanwhile, working from home, I take on most of the childcare duties, though sometimes I need to drop by the office. Despite our differing schedules, we manage, supporting each other and providing for our family. "What's wrong with your voice? Is everything all right?" I asked. "I have a problem, dear. Last night, my bag was stolen when I went down to the hotel lobby for a newspaper. We need to urgently block our credit cards and open new accounts just in case," she said, her voice filled with anxiety. We discussed the details of the incident, and I learned that she had been slightly distracted, leaving her bag unattended. Fortunately, the hotel promised to help, sending someone to check the nearby trash bins in hopes of finding the lost items. "Don't worry. I'll take care of the credit cards right away," I promised, trying to calm her down. We also discussed how she would manage without her driver's license and how soon she could get a replacement from her boss. About 6 weeks have passed since that moment. Luckily, the credit cards were quickly blocked and there were no unauthorized transactions. Her bag with the driver's license and other items was found, and we were able to continue our normal life without further losses. Today, as I was reviewing the statement for Amy's investment account at BFP Express, I remembered the incident. She opened this account after the tragic death of her parents in a car accident, and it's an important part of our family's wealth. Despite all the challenges, we continue to support each other and move forward, cherishing every moment spent together. I always tried to respect her personal space, especially when it came to finances. However, one day, while looking for our home insurance policy, I accidentally stumbled upon a folder with monthly statements from her bank account. After her parents' death, she had inherited about $350,000, and I couldn't help but wonder about the current status of those funds. My surprise was great when I discovered that the amount had grown to over $400,000. But what caught my attention was a $3,000 transaction made about 6 weeks ago. I decided to delve deeper and found out that the funds had been spent in a jewelry store. Despite her not mentioning any major purchases, my curiosity only grew, and I decided to call the store to find out more details. After introducing myself and explaining the situation, I was assisted. The salesperson, after a brief search in the system, found the transaction. To my surprise, she remembered this purchase. A woman, extremely upset, came into the store with a story about losing her wedding and engagement rings, and was very keen on replacing them. She spent a lot of time looking for the perfect replacements. She purchased the rings using a credit card and had a 90-day warranty on them, and soon after, she availed of this option and returned the rings back to the jewelry store. All she mentioned was the theft of her purse. This moment made me think. She did not mention the loss of the rings to me, and it was not entirely clear to me why she needed to first buy the rings and then return them. "I will need to discuss this with my wife and call you back later," I said to the girl. Her voice sounded puzzled, however. Her bewilderment was no match for mine. I wondered how my wife could lose 2 sacred rings, why the rings could have been in her purse. There was only one possibility. She did not want others to know about her marriage. Perhaps it was related to wanting to appear available to men. I had no more guesses. I was not sure if she was cheating, but it seemed to me that she just wanted male attention, nothing more. We have been married for 11 years and have raised 2 children, 7-year-old Jeremy and 6-year-old Melissa. I always thought our marriage was perfect, and our personal life was quite satisfactory. So why did she feel the need to look for relationships elsewhere? Usually, she traveled once a month, leaving for 2 or 3 nights. If she wanted to take a risk and spend a hot night with some man, it wouldn't have been difficult for her, and she definitely wouldn't worry about me suspecting anything. Apparently, losing the rings really scared her, and she decided to replace them with ones that looked very similar. Since the rings I had bought earlier were not expensive, replacing them with similar ones would not be difficult. She could have contacted our insurance company, but then I would have found out about what happened. I was interested in what she had told about the incident at the hotel. I found the hotel's number and decided to call. When I contacted the hotel's security service, I asked them to share the video surveillance footage of how the loss of the bag and the theft of my wife's wallet occurred. They confirmed the existence of a written report on the incident, and I requested they send me a copy by email. A few minutes later, I was studying the document, signed by Amy. In it, she described how her bag was stolen while she was dancing. Having left her bag in the booth where she was sitting, she discovered it was missing when she returned to her seat. Interestingly, Amy asked not to involve the police in this matter. My anxiety grew, realizing that Amy hadn't told me the whole truth. She omitted the loss of the rings that evening, and a month later, she told me she lost them during our walk, when in fact she simply returned them to the store under warranty. What a bitch. I couldn't find any other explanation than to think of the worst scenarios. It was clear that the rings disappeared along with the bag while she was dancing with an unknown man. Learning that she was about to travel again soon, I decided to find out more about her itinerary. I needed to figure out what she does in her free time and whether she spends it with unfamiliar men. But my surveillance plan might fail, as Amy could have been scared after losing the rings and might no longer meet with men. I understood that discovering the truth about her infidelity could end our marriage. Thinking about the children, I didn't want to come to that conclusion. Despite her being a wonderful mother, I couldn't let her take them with her if we were to separate. My mind was working overtime, trying to uncover any clues that she had been unfaithful to me, and apparently not just for a month. What else could hint at her actions during her travels? Making light of the situation, I wondered whether she made her partners use condoms, sure that she wouldn't risk getting pregnant or bringing something home. After the birth of our second child, I underwent a vasectomy, eliminating the possibility of another pregnancy. My wife, apparently distrusting men in matters of contraception, always kept a stash of condoms with her. It seemed she didn't store them at home or in the car, preferring to keep them in her office. I remembered that during business trips, she always took her laptop and documents in a large briefcase, which usually stayed in her office. If she had to fly out early in the morning, she would take the bag home the previous evening. I realized that this was my opportunity to check her briefcase before departure, hoping for an early morning flight for her next business trip. If my theory was correct, and I found condoms in her bag, it would mean she was definitely cheating on me. I decided not to show my suspicions so as not to alert her. There was no point in worrying, as I was too busy taking care of the children after school. However, the thought of a possible affair haunted me. When Amy returned from work, I accidentally dropped a dish of beans, breaking it. As I cleaned up the mess and tried to calm the children, I looked exhausted, but Amy seemed not to notice anything suspicious. I greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, as usual, and we sat down to dinner. During the conversation about our day, I asked about her upcoming trip, trying to sound as casual as possible. "Sweetheart, tell me, are you going anywhere else for work this month?" I asked, trying to hide my anxiety. "Yes, another business trip," she sighed. "Can't say I'm looking forward to it. If you don't like it, maybe you should think about changing jobs. You've been with the company for a long time, you know it well enough. It's time to grow and move on. You would fit in anywhere," I suggested, hoping to distract her from the topic of business trips. "I've thought about it," she admitted, "but I want to endure a little longer before moving to an office job anyway. They pay well, and for our family, it's not hard for me." This conversation only strengthened my resolution to check her briefcase when the opportunity arose. I decided to gently manipulate her and evoke a sense of guilt. "Amy, to be honest, even though you're gone for only a short while, each day without you feels incredibly long. I miss you so much when you leave." I confessed that I missed her and asked where she was going this time and if we could spend some time together in the morning before her departure. She seemed to take my words calmly, despite my internal struggle and turmoil of emotions. I tried to hide my agitation, trying to act as usual, though eating was difficult for me. To her it seemed all that I said and confessed didn't matter, and that angered me. I was hoping to better understand her, especially since her upcoming trip on the 7:30 a.m. flight and her joking, winking response to my words left room for speculation. She promised to return home in a good mood and to park the car in the garage as usual, hinting that everything was going according to plan. However, her calm attitude about the trip in front of our children and me raised questions about her true intentions. The evening before her departure, she came home apparently in high spirits, which raised further questions for me. She didn't bring her briefcase inside, leaving it in the car, which I found odd. At dinner, she asked me to fetch her suitcase from the garage after eating, confirming that everything was set for a typical business trip. She assured me that she had everything she needed and that I shouldn't worry about her absence. We discussed plans for the time she would be away, agreeing that the kids and I would stick to our usual schedule, but also decided to do something special as a family over the weekend after her return. This conversation added to our mutual anticipation of seeing each other again. After dinner, we cleaned up the kitchen together, and after starting the dishwasher, she went to pack her things, and I headed to the garage for her suitcase, pondering the days ahead. When I looked in her car, I noticed the absence of her briefcase and speculated that she might have hidden it in the trunk. This thought came to me as I was returning to the bedroom, carrying her suitcase. It occurred to me to ask her for the car keys, explaining that she seemed to have a flat tire. I offered to take it to the gas station for repair, and she appeared momentarily troubled, but then, pulling the keys out of her purse, asked if it wouldn't be better to fit the spare tire. I replied that we had time to fix everything, and headed to the garage. As I was backing out, I drove to the corner gas station owned by my childhood friend, Jerry. Approaching one of his bays, I signaled him, and seeing me, he opened the door, allowing me to enter. "What can I do for you?" he asked, but I replied that I needed to check something else, mentioning some domestic issues. Opening the trunk, I took out Amy's briefcase and placed it on the workbench. Using the key from her keychain, I carefully opened it. "I have a client, so entertain yourself," Jerry told me, going back to his shop. I began to carefully inspect the suitcase, trying not to touch its contents unnecessarily. Feeling the pockets on the lid, my fingers found a packet, which I pulled out. My heart sank when I saw an open packet of condoms, missing 3. My worst suspicions were confirmed. I returned the package to the place I had taken it from and carefully locked the suitcase and put it back in the trunk. Closing it, I turned to Jerry, who had just arrived. "How are you doing? Did you find what you need?" he asked. "Unfortunately, yes. Can you give me some time to recover? Can I sit here?" I asked. He nodded at me and I added, "Don't you want to check the tire pressure? That way I can tell her that the problem is solved." "Okay, I'll do it," he replied, although his gaze was full of bewilderment. He was silent, but after checking the tires, he decided to talk to me for a while, and our short dialogue brought me to my senses. Leaving him, I headed home. My heart was heavy, and my thoughts were spinning about the betrayal that Amy had inflicted on me, our children, and our marriage. I felt a mixture of anger and disappointment. After returning home, I began to make plans on how to obtain definitive proof of her infidelity in order to secure custody of the children. Despite everything, she was a good mother, and I understood that children need a mother. I would have allowed meetings, but my goal was to get full custody. I wanted her to regret having sex with strangers for the rest of her life, while her children and husband dutifully waited for her return. When I entered the house, I called out to her that everything was ready, referring to a minor malfunction that I had fixed. She thanked me, but I still couldn't look her in the eye, so I went to the kitchen, got a beer, and settled in the living room with the kids who were watching TV. After a while, Amy joined us, sitting next to us on the couch. I managed to cool down, but the sadness that our once happy family would soon break up still gnawed at me. Amy snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear about her readiness for intimacy. I took a sip of beer before replying that I might be ready, although I felt discomfort in my stomach. "Oh, that's terrible, honey," she said, snuggling even closer. I automatically put my arm around her shoulders, and despite everything, I felt affection for her. While we were sitting on the couch watching TV, questions were spinning in my head. Why is Amy putting our marriage at risk? For what? For a fleeting pleasure? Or is she getting a dose of adrenaline? It was not clear to me. Time passed quickly. We put the children to bed. I saw Amy gently kissed our sons on the forehead and wished them good night. We looked like a full-fledged happy family, only with a large tumor that would have to be eliminated. I went to bed, and Amy went to the shower. After about 15 minutes, she came out. "Darling, I see you feel bad. Can I give you a medical examination?" she said. Amy came out of the shower in a nurse's costume. She looked defiant and very hot, but I rejected her because I had a serious stomach ache. Instead of having sex, I hugged her and wanted to have a heart-to-heart conversation. "Do you really need this trip? Can it be canceled?" I asked. "I'm sorry, but unfortunately I have to go. I simply cannot postpone it any longer," she said, although I knew she could cancel the trip at any moment, as she had done a couple of times before, mostly without a valid reason. When Amy fell asleep, I decided to check her suitcase, which I had brought from the garage. It contained neatly folded clothes, her business attire, but beneath them, there was something more intriguing. For some reason, Amy had packed several sets of expensive and intimate lingerie and a very short, tight dress for her business trip. I couldn't even remember the last time I saw her in it. I put everything back in place, closed the suitcase, and went to bed. That night, I slept poorly, and when I heard Amy getting up at 5 in the morning, I just stayed in bed. Instead of the usual goodbye, I realized that I felt exhausted and depressed. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked, gently kissing me on the cheek before leaving. After the sound of the garage door closing faded, I finally got up and headed for the shower. After dropping the kids off at school and having breakfast, my day was filled with tension. I pulled out the phone book and started looking for private detective services with branches across the country. After making a few calls, I found a suitable one with an office in the city Amy was heading to. I scheduled a meeting for that morning and then found a divorce lawyer recommended by a friend and arranged a meeting for the afternoon. At the private detective's office, I arranged for them to follow Amy in the evenings. I provided them with her photo and information about her hotel to facilitate identification and surveillance. They promised to send a report and photos of her activities to my email by Monday morning. Warning that they might not catch them in a compromising situation, they promised to provide as much evidence of infidelity as possible. The meeting with the lawyer was successful. He assured me that, although fault does not play a role in divorce proceedings, given my role as the primary caregiver for the children, I was likely to be granted their custody. However, Amy would have extensive visitation rights. We agreed on dividing the property equally, without alimony payments, considering our equal incomes. Amy would have to provide financial support for the children based on the inheritance she received, but anything related to this inheritance she could keep for herself. My top priority was always our children. I approached him with a request to prepare all the necessary documents by Monday, considering our irreconcilable differences. I specifically emphasized that Amy must immediately leave our home upon receiving the appropriate notification. My lawyer confirmed that as the guardian of the children, I have the right to demand the sale of the house upon their reaching adulthood, with the subsequent division of the proceeds. Leaving his office, I felt satisfied with the thought that life for me and the children would continue, and Amy would get what she deserved for her infidelity. Deciding not to touch our financial insurance, I realized that after handing over her inheritance, she should not worry about her share in our savings. With the children, who were soon to finish school, I headed home to meet them from the bus on Friday afternoon. A couple of days later, my wife returned from a business trip, and the first thing she did was to wash her clothes. I offered Amy help with the laundry and received thanks and smiled to myself, thinking about her intention to do it herself to hide the smell of someone else's perfume, revealing her extramarital affairs. It seemed she sensed my reserved attitude, asking about my stomach problems. I cunningly replied that I was going to try a new remedy recommended by a friend, hoping for a quick improvement. Her desire to see me fully operational again was evident when she pressed against me before sleep. The next morning, after the children went to school and Amy to work, I received a call from the private detective's office with news that the report was ready. I promised to come immediately, and half an hour later was discussing with the manager the details of the report received in the morning, including several photographs. He confessed to me that he had not had time to read everything, but a brief review of the materials and photographs made a strong impression on him. I took a copy of the report and immersed myself in reading. Amy, I began my notes on the observation of the subject at 17:15 on Wednesday in the lobby of the Re Hotel. Thanks to a photo sent from the office in Merrickville and a badge with the company logo, we were able to establish her identity. She was holding a briefcase when she approached the elevators. My colleague accompanied her on the elevator and confirmed that Amy entered her room 417 at 17:23. She was alone. In the provided photograph, taken before she entered the room, Amy was dressed in a business style. I noted that rings sparkled on her fingers. The photograph was taken with a mobile phone by an assistant who stayed in the adjacent room, 425. Amy warned me when she left the room at 1832, going up to the lobby in the elevator. In the photograph, Amy appeared in an elegant black cocktail dress, on heels, with a necklace that I had given her for our 10th anniversary, and she looked stunning, although the photo already showed that she was not wearing her wedding ring. The subject headed to the dining room, where she dined with a glass of wine at 1913. Then she moved to the lounge, where she took a seat at the bar and ordered wine at 1917. A stranger approached her, and after a short conversation, Amy followed him to a secluded table near the dance floor. They spent about an hour and 43 minutes together, danced 6 times, which led to a closeness. In this photo, Amy and the man are depicted in a tight embrace, her short dress hitched up. At 20:51, they left the lounge, took the elevator to her floor, and entered her room 417. The photo shows that Amy appeared slightly tipsy but cheerful. At 23:13, the man left her room. Further investigation revealed that the car the man left in was registered to a man who is married and has 2 children. Going through the remaining pages of history, I discovered that the next day she repeated her actions, but with a different man. This was recorded by the investigator. My discovery of my wife's unworthy behavior, leaving our home, was unbearable for me. Even the disappearance of the rings, which I thought should have scared her, did not stop her. After paying the remaining part of the bill, I thanked the detective and left, taking a couple of extra copies of the report on CDs with me. Heading home, I immediately contacted my divorce lawyer and inquired about the status of our divorce papers. Hearing that everything was ready for filing, I asked him to proceed with the process and inquired if it was possible to serve the papers publicly at her work the next day. The lawyer assured me that it would be no trouble, and I provided him with the address of her workplace. I wanted her to feel humiliated, believing that public service of the documents at work would help me avenge her actions that night and for all she had done during her business trips. We did not talk, but I felt she knew something was wrong. Perhaps she guessed that I knew something, but was afraid to express her anxiety, except to say she hoped for my swift recovery. Strangely, she seemed a bit restrained, though I did not mention it. In the morning, after a sleepless night, I got up early and worked on the computer until I heard the child wake up, and then I went to prepare breakfast. When I saw Amy off to work, she hugged and kissed me before leaving. I hesitantly responded to her embrace before she left. As I closed the door behind her, I saw tears in her eyes, and she whispered, "I love you." After she left, my heart was filled with deep sadness, to the point where tears struggled to break free, but I had to stay strong for the sake of the children. They needed my support to get ready for the school bus. Suddenly, around 10:45, the phone rang. The screen showed that it was Amy's workplace calling. I answered without waiting for the call to connect, and there was an awkward pause during which I decided to stay silent. Then I heard her regret, whispered through the silence, before the line went dead. That night she did not return home, making me wonder if she was playing her little sick game, no longer caring about our family's comfort. I admit I was strict with her, but my anger was fully justified. The children asked about their mother, and to distract them, I took them to dinner at a cafe. By the evening, they were so tired that they went to bed without any further questions. The next morning, Amy called, asking if she could pick up some of her things and talk to me. Feeling guilty, I offered to meet from 9 to noon when we wouldn't be home. Our conversations would now take place one-on-one in my lawyer's office, after she signs and returns the notarized divorce documents. In the lawyer's office, she begged me to cancel the divorce, explaining that the lack of unrestricted access to the children was unbearable for her. However, I could not forgive her betrayal. She told me she had sought help from a psychologist who diagnosed her with sexual tension and that she was getting help, but that was not enough for me. I left her in tears, signing the divorce papers. 6 months later, our marriage was officially dissolved. During our divorce, an unexpected truth was revealed. She turned out to be pregnant. However, to my surprise, she terminated the pregnancy following an accidental incident with the last of her lovers. There was a problem with a condom at a critical time for her, which made the situation even more complicated. Her infidelities became evident not just because of the lost rings. Likely, even without this incident, her secrets would have soon become known. Learning that she was returning to the social scene and dating again made me reflect. If she decides to remarry, I felt it was my duty to warn her future husband about her past to avoid repeating our mistakes. Meanwhile, I have not lost hope of finding genuine love. Meeting a woman who truly appealed to me, I discovered in her not only a peer in age, but also someone with similar life challenges. She told me about her divorce after catching her husband cheating and decided not to tolerate the betrayal. This shared experience brought us closer. Her openness and the way she interacts with children add points in her favor in my eyes. I am beginning to feel that it is only a matter of time before our relationship moves to a new level.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!